Anne Marie Slaughter, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
It's a broad question, but who has Trump's ear in foreign policy? Who are his major advisors, and how would you assess them?
Are we off the record now?
No, we're still on Facebook, right?
Okay.
Is that correct?
We are on Facebook, but this would be put on the web.
That's correct. Okay. So we are.
Just learning the ground rules. So I think that's still up for discussion, but I do think that having H.R. McMaster as National Security Advisor was a good choice, a very good choice. He's worked with New America on the future of war. He's a strategic thinker. He is a decisive person, and you are starting to see some important changes and also some important hires. Dina Powell is now an Assistant National Security Advisor. Nadia Shadlow, who was at the Smith-Richardson Foundation, smart, kind of more traditional conservative, but qualified person. I think also Secretary Mattis, it's not clear to me how much influence Secretary Tillerson has, but I know he and Secretary Mattis are close, and so that's important. So I do think you are seeing on a group of people who are serious and very well connected to the broader conservative and to some extent liberal foreign policy world. These are people I know, I respect, and I will certainly talk to. And my view is, whatever you think about President Trump, this is about national security and patriotism. I will talk to anybody who wants to talk to me. So I am encouraged. I also think actually on Arab-Israeli issues or Israeli-Palestinian issues, that's something, that's the deal of the century. It's something that attracts Donald Trump. And from what I've seen, Jared Kushner is playing a role, but also special representative. They're tackling that with a broad and careful approach that I've been encouraged by to date. So I think the jury is still out, and Donald Trump is unpredictable, and you could find tomorrow that he suddenly says, you know, I'm betraying I need to go back to what I said on the campaign. But I think the prospect of nuclear strikes or the implosion of the Middle East has a way of concentrating the mind.
What about back at your own stomping grounds? We keep hearing that there's nobody's home at the State Department, that they're really, can you give us a feel for what that's like without that level of people there to work?
I cannot actually imagine it, and I do know many, many people in the State Department are deeply demoralized. Came in with Secretary Clinton. I didn't know her, but I'd met her twice. But the Director of Policy Planning is not Senate confirmed. It's an Assistant Secretary of State level job that's not Senate confirmed. So I was in 2 days after she was. So I watched what happened. She already had 2 deputies, and she had one of the finest undersecretaries for political affairs ever, Bill Burns. So she already had 2 terrific deputies and 1 undersecretary who was going to stay. And then over the next 3 to 4 months, so certainly by April, she had a bunch of assistant secretaries. That's the connective tissue between all the knowledge in the Foreign Service and the political establishment. And it goes up to the secretary and over to the White House, but also to the Pentagon, to USAID, to the Department of Homeland Security, to the Justice Department. There's none of that there. You've got, he doesn't even have a deputy, and how you could possibly act without a deputy, because that means when he's on the road, nothing happens. I mean, you've got Tom Shannon, who's a very talented career Foreign Service officer, but he's one person and he's acting. So, you know, State Department's like any other organization. Acting does not get the same respect as fully there. So I think, it means essentially that Secretary Tillerson is acting as a lone agent, as part of maybe the White House orbit, but not the establishment of American foreign policy. And I think there are lots of changes that need to be made at state, but I worry, because we're dealing with other countries that are fully staffed. I do worry very much about that.
Thank you for this discussion today. When we're talking about Mattis and Tillerson, I mean, I've read that they had people they really wanted to work with them, but sometimes those people were Democrats, or, maybe they had offended Mr. Trump in some way. And so the White House had just said, no, you can't have your people. What is that, Bannon, that's denying them?
Well, that is true. Secretary Tillerson wanted Elliott Abrams, who's an old hand and has served in multiple administrations, and he was denied. And I don't know who in the White House said no. I think there was a sense that there was an enemies list, and that if you'd come out against President Trump, you were not going to be hired. A lot of my Republican colleagues were very brave, I think, during the campaign season to say, again, national security is more important than party, and we think this is really very dangerous. And they knew they had to know their names were being taken. That may change again. Again, Dina Powell was somebody in the George W. Bush administration. She has many friends who were never Trump, and it may be again that just as a matter of national security, that maybe that will soften. But certainly to date, that's been true, and I just don't know who in the White House is enforcing that.
So in Korea, after 20 years of concessions that really probably haven't worked too well, Donald Trump is making a decision that we're going to stop. Do you think that's a good approach? And realistically, at this point in time, what are our alternatives?
I do think it's a good approach. I actually think Secretary Clinton would have done the same thing. She said, as you just said, at some point you stop banging your head against the wall, right? We have been following the same strategy since roughly 1994, and what we have for it is a nuclear arsenal developed by North Korea, and now moving closer and closer to ICBMs. We cannot let that happen. We really can't. In the first place, if that does happen, it's South Korea, Japan, other countries may decide, look, we've got to have nuclear weapons as well. And we can't let it happen just for our own security. So I think he's playing a scary game. This is closer to the Cuban Missile Crisis, where but this time it's with the Chinese, and where we're saying, look, if you don't put pressure on North Korea, we will act. And I think I'm not sure it will work, but I can't think of anything better to do. And I think I'm glad, again, that he did use force against Syria, that he did make clear, look, don't mess with me. Because that is part of diplomacy. You have to be credible. It might not work, but I can't think of anything better to do.
I'm wondering about the election process and the state of democracy. And you're thinking about how we can safeguard our system. There must be something we can do.
Yeah.
That's not easy.
It's not easy. Although I will say that well, let me back up. Let me start with what I think we should be doing with the Russians. And here again, I would have gone further than President Obama did. I think, expelling diplomats and sanctions was not tough enough. We have the ability to hack back. We have the ability to expose some of President Putin's secrets. That is our cyber capability, and it's as good as anyone else's, and I think I would have used it. I would not have done it directly, but when North Korea hacked Sony, we did something. I don't know exactly what we did, but it hasn't happened again. And so we made it very clear to the North Koreans that if they did that again, they were going to regret it. And I think we should have done more with the Russians, because this is the new frontier of a lot of our war. It will be through cyber, and you want to make clear you have cyber offensive capabilities that are as strong as when we used to do this with nuclear weapons. So that's the first thing I would do. On the second, there is not evidence that they actually penetrated our votes, right? They certainly changed the way many voters thought about things. It was psychological warfare, but they didn't, as far as we can tell, affect the integrity of our actual voting system. And so what we now need to do is strengthen our protections around the actual vote, and then we need to do a lot around fake news, which is already happening, and again, being able to counter a number of the techniques they use, using bots on social media, et cetera. But I am confident we can do what we need to do to ensure that no one can actually change the votes of the American people.
You know, Doug didn't get to one question, and I want to wrap up with you. And you wrote in a piece in 2013, you were talking about President Obama, and you said he still hadn't taken to heart the full extent of discrimination against women. What did he get wrong?
I wrote that?
Yeah.
In 2013?
Uh-huh. How did you feel about how President Obama handled it?
I feel, so I will say I think President Obama evolved in a very good way. I think the first administration, there were not nearly enough women in high places. He was surrounded by a strong boys network, and there were many of us who felt that I've seen this movie before, your heart's in the right place, but you don't actually walk the talk. But by the end of the administration, there were many powerful women in official and advisory positions, and I gave him a lot of credit. I gave him a lot of credit for the work he did on family support, and actually as a father himself. I quote him in Unfinished Business saying, when I look back at the end of my life, what will be most important is having spent time with my daughters and watching my daughters grow. I give him complete support for that as the nation's president and as the first father. So I'm not quite sure what I meant there, but I might have been referring to the way his administration shaped up in the first administration, but I think he did a great job overall.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks a lot.